Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Sorry, this supposed to come at 7 o'clock UK time, but I'm a bit late today. My apologies for that. The issue I wanted to discuss today is a few weeks ago, I posted this video where I was raising the key point that Chamisa should be accountable. He has held public office and he should therefore be accountable. And I say that he should be accountable on three key points. The first one is that MDC, Movement for Democratic Change, and Triple C were elected, officials were elected on the understanding that they would implement the democratic reforms to stop ZANU-PF elections. Last year's election, ZANU-PF blatantly rigged those elections, precisely because MDC Triple C had failed to implement even one token reform. And so Chamisa and company must account for it. And the second point is they must also account for participating in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the elections were flawed, and that participating will give ZANU-PF legitimacy. And they still went ahead and participated out of greed. As one of them, David Coulthard, has admitted. And, and the third point is that particularly Chamisa himself should account for blatantly lying to the people, to the electorate, to con them into participating in these flawed elections. Chamisa in 2018 said MDC Alliance, which he was leading then, had stringent measures to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. And that was the reason why he was persisting in participating in those elections without reforms. Of course, he knew he was lying. MDC Alliance did not have any stringent measures to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. He just wanted the people to participate. And this he repeated again last year's elections. He is the one who is on record saying he has plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. Again, he just wanted the people to participate. I've had many responses, and I've just picked one. At the bottom of my reform there is the remark from one of the correspondents. And he's basically saying, well, Chamisa has had this chance, he should resign. Well, I think the quick answer to that one is that as long as he has got a fair chance of participating in these elections, securing himself a seat on the gravy train, he will never resign. Nor will any of his other colleagues ever resign. That's one thing we can forget about. But I think the other point that he raised is an important one, which is the main reason why I wanted to talk about this today. And the point he raised is maybe people are participating in this election because there is no viable political alternative to MDC Triple C. That is food for thought. But I think we've got to be very careful how we negotiate that point. Why? Well, if we're not careful, we end up going round and round in circles. Let's first of all consider, is there a viable political alternative? At the present moment, no. I totally agree with that. Zimbabwe has got, at the last, or at least 2018 elections, ZEC announced that there were over 130 political parties that participated in that election. I think the number has been reduced considerably in 2023 because of the hefty nomination fees that ZEC was demanding for parliamentarians. And for me, being a member of parliament, to contest that one, you needed 1,000 US dollars. And for the presidential, 20,000. And many people just could not afford it, period. So the number of participants will be reduced because of that. But in 2018, when the nomination fee was more modest, there were a record 130 political parties. And of those, can I pick any one of them as an alternative? The answer is no. So if it is an alternative to any other party other than, then there were 130 of them. But was any one of those of any quality worth noting? The answer is no. So yes, there is some truth in saying there's no alternative. But what we've got to ask ourselves here is, can they possibly be an alternative in the circumstance, in the present political atmosphere in Zimbabwe? I think that comes back to the electorate. If the people of Zimbabwe, the electorate, think that MDC is quality, and that's why they've continued to support the party, even in the face of repeated blundering by MDC, then we cannot expect there could possibly be any quality emerging under those conditions. If the electorate is not good enough to see that the MDC, Triple C, corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless, then why should we expect that they will see quality, even if they were presented with one? It's not a chicken and egg situation here. You need to have an electorate that understands. For instance, we have been talking about reforms. I said at the beginning, the opposition, MDC, were elected by the people on the understanding they will deliver democratic change. Now, after 24 years, if the electorate were competent, they would by now be saying, what happened here? After 24 years, 5 of which in the GNU, why is it that MDC has failed to implement even one democratic reform? That alone would force, even within the MDC itself, quality people to emerge. That has not happened. The people still believe that MDC will deliver what we want. How do you expect quality to come out? I believe there is within MDC, Triple C, there have been some individuals who have shown quality. I'll come back to this again and again. After the 2013 elections, it was clear those elections were flawed. It was clear that nothing could possibly come out of any good could come out of that. And then the IBT in 2015, in an interview, admitted as much and was arguing that there's no point in keeping on participating in these flawed elections when all we are doing here is benefiting Robert Mugabe, who has mastered the art of rigging elections. He wasn't the only one who saw that. David Coulthard said the same thing in his book. And the most notable phrase there was the 2013 electoral process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw. Okay, people can argue whether the evidence was enough to withdraw, but let's just, for the sake of argument, agree that he had seen the evidence and it was overwhelming. And indeed, the evidence was there and was overwhelming. But the electorate themselves, did they see that? If you didn't see it, then that is where the problem is. Here was somebody, I think he was on the right track. Here was a real alternative. And you failed to appreciate him. You failed to appreciate what he was saying. You failed to follow his argument that the logical step here is to withdraw. Because when you withdraw, you force ZANU-PF to implement the reforms. What's the point of having rules if when somebody doesn't follow those rules, you still say, oh, we must participate regardless? Why would that person even bother implementing the rules if they know that you will participate no matter what? So in many ways, the obvious alternative has always been there. It's just that the electorate have not been smart enough to see it. And so they've continued to go on with Chamisa in this case, regardless. So it wasn't the lack of an alternative. I think the alternative was there. The other point here is if we accept the argument that the electoral process in Zimbabwe is so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step is to withdraw, which is a position that I firmly subscribe to. Forming a political party with that stance, number one, the electorate would not understand that. So they're not likely to follow it, as they did with David Crofter here. Tendai Biti actually formed his own party in 2014, and we know that it didn't get very far. He failed to attract followers. And in the end, he's given up and went back to MDC. But even if we say we have a new party, a new party is formed. If it is of any quality, then I believe they've got to subscribe to that notion that it's pointless participating in flawed elections that are illegal. More so now that last year SADC and the AU election observers condemned Zimbabwe's election process as flawed and illegal. So if the new party that is formed, which we'll call then the alternative, was to make that stand, number one, they will have a tough time convincing people to believe that that is the right course, particularly when you look at what happened, say, for instance, last year. People were warned that participating in the 2023 elections without reforms was flawed. It will only give ZANU-PF legitimacy that they still participated. In their millions, nearly 2 million Zimbabweans voted for Chamisa last year. But the other argument that will almost is that a party, this alternative party was to be formed, is, and that argument was said last year, for instance. Many of the opposition parties that participated in last year's elections, the most common argument was there must be a ZANU-PF project there to divide the opposition vote. If they are serious, then they should join the existing so that we don't divide the opposition vote. In other words, we're back to where we started. People are saying, oh, people are still following Chamisa because there's no alternative. Yet when they're given an alternative, before they even examine it, they only look at, you are here to divide the opposition vote. You must join the existing opposition. I think if that alternative party was formed, well, some of the political aspirants will join it. Even if they were to say, yes, I totally subscribe to the notion that there's no point in participating in flawed elections without meaningful reforms. But as the election gets nearer and nearer, I would not be surprised to find that those people would change. They would want to participate. They will argue that participating has got more impact than not participating. In other words, they're back to square one. Because if you participate, you give the process legitimacy. And ZANU-PF, that's one thing that ZANU-PF has been counting on. Enticing the opposition to participate no matter what. And that they've successfully done. So in this case here, my conclusion is The issue of people are still supporting the opposition because there's no alternative. I think it's a fallacious argument. Even if we forget the likes of Tendai Biti, who gave a radically different position to MDC and Triple C, and therefore they should have attracted following. Even if we say, okay, because they hadn't launched any political party and pushed that view with any seriousness, even if we forget those, we still have the problem that the people themselves, if you really believe that this process is so flawed, so illegal, participating will only give legitimacy to ZANU-PF. Even if I'm not given another choice, surely that is enough for me to say, well, I'm not going to participate then. Because it doesn't make any sense to participate in a process that you know is flawed, that you know by participating you give the rigging ZANU-PF party legitimacy. It doesn't make any sense. That should not be a quantum leap. That should be the obvious, the logical step. The question then is, why did the people in so many numbers fail to make that quantum leap, to make that logical step? That is where the problem is. Zimbabwe is in serious trouble. I believe this issue of, oh, we have no alternative, so we've got to keep on supporting Chamisa and company is just an excuse to carry on doing the wrong thing. The right thing is staring us in the face. SADC and the AU election observers last year have made that reality even more glaring. We cannot ignore it anymore. SADC and the AU election observers condemned Zimbabwe's election process last year as flawed and illegal. If the people, and it is an individual choice, every one of us has got the right to participate if they so wish. But at the end of the day, we as voters, we also all have got a responsibility to ourselves and to the rest of the community. If by participating, you are giving the process legitimacy and thus perpetuating the dictatorship, that is the most irresponsible thing you can do. I believe SADC last year would have denied the ZANU-PF political legitimacy if it had not been for two things, or rather three things. Number one, that SADC was weakened by having South Africa as a dominant partner in the region. And in November 2022, ANC made a party resolution saying that they were not going to accept regime change in Zimbabwe. Everybody knew exactly what that meant. They knew ZANU-PF has been rigging elections. And they were sending a clear message to ZANU-PF You go ahead and rig the elections and we will support you. And they did. While most other SADC countries, leaders, refused to go to Mnangagwa's inauguration after the rigged elections. President Ramaphosa and many of his ANC leaders attended the inauguration. And I believe the damning report from SADC, while the regional body finally accepted that damning report, they could not do anything about it. When history comes to be written and the truth uncovered, I would not be surprised at all to find that South Africa was the one SADC country that did not want ZANU-PF disciplined for that. Number two, CCC had participated in the flawed elections. And not only that, even when SADC came up with the damning report, CCC members who had won the few Gravitrans seats still went ahead and took up their seats. And they defended that position, claiming that where they had won, those were liberated zones. The elections in those areas were free, fair, and credible. And most important of all, the Zimbabweans themselves had participated in their numbers in those flawed elections. While I can have sympathy for the rural areas where the party machinery frog marched people to attend, to go to the polling stations and vote, I cannot justify it in the urban centers. And in public in general, very few Zimbabweans came out to denounce those elections and to urge people not to participate. Very few. So as far as SADC and the AU and the rest of the world indeed were concerned, the ordinary Zimbabweans participated in last year's elections on the basis they believed Chamisa had plugged the vote rigging loopholes. As long as you've got an electorate that is that naive, that ignorant, that gullible, SADC and outsiders will find it very difficult to deny ZANU-PF legitimacy. So the challenge for 2028 is that you don't need to have an alternative political party to Chamisa for you to say the election process is flawed and I should not participate. Because even if there was that party, the only position it should take is that you should not participate. And the people will be criticizing that party and saying, no, 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 no. You are asking people, you are dividing the opposition vote. Because those who believe the opposition would win would be arguing that if people do not participate, then the number of people to take this blue bus of Chamisa across the line has been reduced. So that party will always be considered as you must be a ZANU-PF project there to divide the opposition. Whereas in reality, that alternative position is the only meaningful alternative position. We can't be arguing round and round in circles. You don't need to have an alternative political party to make that decision. I repeat, 2028 elections are coming. ZANU-PF is not going to implement even one token reform. Chamisa, when he finally launches his new party, will participate in those elections and will be telling people that this time he has got other stringent measures that he has come up with to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. People will participate in their millions, give ZANU-PF legitimacy. That has nothing to do with there was no alternative. The alternative, you don't need an alternative. The rational position is the process is so flawed, so illegal, the only logical step is to withdraw. And SADC in the AU election reports of last year have reaffirmed that position. There is no point in participating in flawed elections only to perpetuate your own suffering. Thank you very much, those of you who were able to join me today. And we hope we'll meet again sometime soon. Tomorrow, sometime 7 o'clock. UK time, 8 o'clock, Zimbabwe time. Thank you again and have a good day.